Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of What's on Your Shelf. I'm your host, Mulure Mike, and this is a place where we hang out around books and literature to travel the world, to get experiences week after week. And today we are honored to have a very beautiful lady with us on this show. And this lady will bring us to a space of culture, African woman's identity. We are pleased to be hosting Atieno Ochieng.
Thank you so much, Mike. Atieno is a bunch of things or people. First of all, I'm a journalist, certified journalist. I'm a storyteller, podcaster, writer, and recently event moderator. So yeah, I'm entering into the emceeing world. So you'll find me in a lot of book events, moderating, interviewing authors. But above all else, I'm a passionate woman of culture. I think the gaps that are there are what are fueling me to want to discover more about my identity as a Luo woman, as a Kenyan woman, and now the global space and African woman. I read books for a living and I review them, I interview authors. I grew up being called Ayuka Nyakodi. Ayuka is actually a name that was given to me by my two grandmothers. I never wanted to disappoint my dad, ever. So when I was, even as I'm working hard, as I'm studying in school, it's my dad that I didn't want to disappoint. My grandpa was polygamist. That's why we all are sisters from the same house. If you cannot keep yourself kempt, that's a turn off. I don't listen to words. I listen to actions.
This year we promised that we were going to step out and try and promote the culture of reading in the underserved communities. And to start us off this year, allow me to introduce you to the first place we are doing this. We went to in Kasipul Kabondo, Homa Bay County. So have a look at this. We promised that this year, What's on Your Shelf was going to step out to increase and support initiatives that promote the culture of reading. And today we're in Homa Bay County. To be specific, we are at Kakelo Secondary School, which is in Kasipul Kabondo constituency, Homa Bay County. Why are we here? Their motto, endeavor for knowledge, cannot be achieved because this school doesn't have a library, or rather, they have a small space, a bookstore, where the books are kept. And one of the things that I want to invite you and I to see it, and if we deem fit, help Kakelo Secondary School in Homa Bay County have a state-of-art, modern library facility.
With a population of about 200 students, this is what Kakelo Secondary School has as their library. Just one table can barely accommodate 5 kids reading at a go. It's dark. It's around 2 o'clock. Let me say it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And this is how dark this place is. Imagine what it will look like at around 5 or 6. I'm now seated with the school captain who's going to give us the student perspective of this school. So, my brother, welcome to What's on Your Shelf.
Thank you.
What would you say has been your challenge?
School is not a school without a library, because library take part in school education. Most students study in library. It is very small. Sometimes you may be sent by any teacher to go to the library to pick a book for him, but you can't be specific where the book it is. It will force you to waste a lot of time for you just to locate where is the book.
So what does Collins aspire to become?
Me personally, I wish to become a journalist.
By the way, I sneaked into a parents' sort of a meeting earlier, and some of the parents also still have thirst for reading. Who knows if some of them will be allowed into the library, but our responsibility, me and you, is to ensure that this place has a modern library facility. So we are here at Kakelo Secondary School, and I'm here with the principal, who is going to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about Kakelo Secondary School.
Thank you very much, Madam Agnes Achuodo, the BM Secretary and Principal of the school. I thank you for visiting our school. Our school is humble, but we have enough basic facilities for learning. We have a total population of 168 students. We have students from Form 2 to Form 4, and this year we have 40 candidates. Yes.
So maybe a little background about the school. When was it formed, and how would you rate how the school has performed over the years?
The school has a long history. Yeah, because this school was started in the year 1950.
Wow.
Yeah, so it went up to 1970. Then it collapsed. Then it started again. And actually it peaked in the year 2000. Yeah, so from the year 2000, the school had support from the parents. Actually, these buildings that we are seeing here are as a result of support of the parents.
A friend of ours invited us and told us about the school having, I would say, no library facility.
Yes.
Tell us about that, because I think that is something that is very interesting for us now as what's on your shelf.
Yeah, we actually don't have a library per se. What we have is just some small room where we keep books, bookstore. So when students want to use these books, where they are collected from that bookstore and taken to class. Actually, these are books from the government that you give the students at the beginning of the term. They use them throughout the term, and then they are returned back to the store at the end of the term. But we don't have reading space. We don't have a library. We don't have a reading space. We have a room that we can use for library. Like I'd said, these classes are 5. So we can still use these 2 for the extra classes. So we have another extra class there, which was initially meant for the CBC. And so that class is free. Because when they join in senior secondary, we'll have still classes around here. So we can use that class basically as library. Yes.
So do you mind taking
that
us
space
to
is
that
there.
place? We go and check it out. Guys, can we go check out
No, I don't mind.
our library?
I don't mind.
Right. Welcome aboard. And let's turn this into a modern library facility. You and I can make it, together with this community of Kakelo Secondary School.
Yeah, so if you've seen need, we want to invite all the community members of What's on Your Shelf and the people around us to help Kakelo Secondary School have a library, a state-of-art library. We call it 21st century library facility that can help those kids in that village explore and experience knowledge in a way that will make them competitive in the modern world. So, back to you, Atieno.
And congratulations on that project.
Thank you so much.
I think it's important that in as much as people live in their own worlds, it could be in poverty, it could be in wealth, that books are a refuge that everyone can turn to.
I agree.
So it's brilliant. Congratulations.
I agree.
Yes. Yeah.
So you've spoken a lot about being a writer, being a podcaster.
Yeah.
And we've known now who you are.
Yeah.
But what do you do?
What do I do?
Yes.
I read books for a living. And I review them. I interview authors. I think I started doing this last year when I joined Ikitabu. And the platform that I do this on is Books in Africa. So Books in Africa is a resource that allows for publishers all over the continent to find a place to trade rights, buy and sell rights. So if they find a book that they like, they can request to translate it, westernizing our books in a way, because people are interested in African stories, African identity. So Books in Africa is the resource that I work for.
Think about where you are at today. A trained journalist, but finds a space, an unconventional space where your journalism now comes to practice.
Yeah.
But when you're looking at this digital space, because I'm sure most of it is digital marketing, how would you say the future of journalism has been influenced by the digital landscape and how it has opened up?
Far and wide. I think the people just keep, they like putting, to put the death stamp on things. Books are dead, TV is dead, radio. Give us a break. With the digital space that we're in right now, you don't need to have a TV. You can actually watch news on your phone in transit. Remember when people had to rush home? I remember my dad, sometimes before 9 p.m., he had to make sure he had to be home for the primetime news. But right
Yes.
now, you don't need to run through the streets just to make sure you catch the 7 p.m. or 9 p.m. news. You can watch it on the go.
Yeah.
And e-kitabu, where I work from, e means digital and kitabu means books for your audience who do not understand Swahili. So basically, we are making books accessible wherever you are. You can be in Ghana, you can be in Turkey, in Israel. You can still find these books on these platforms. And thanks to the digital era, thanks to the internet,
Yeah.
honestly, books are being consumed in a different way other than print. I love to consume my books in a print format, as you can see.
Yeah.
But for those who prefer audiobooks, for those who prefer ebooks, then this is a platform that is offered to everyone.
Yeah.
So we're lifting that death stamp and we're saying, actually, in the internet and the digital era is revolutionizing how we are consuming products.
Yeah.
Even shopping. Right now, people prefer to shop online
Yeah.
than going to the stores. So what does that say?
Well, let me ask you, because when you look at now a trained journalist,
Yes.
now in the digital marketplace, the strategies that sometimes you have to employ in the digital landscape
Yeah.
to aggressively market are things the trained journalists would call maybe unprofessional, or that is not how it's supposed to be done.
Oh.
How do you balance that bridge between professionalism and creativity
I love
and the demands of that landscape?
I love knowing the rules so I can break them, and I just love to do it so that I can tell the people who are very uptight, those who have they have clenched their butts with, do it like this. No, the digital era demands that you be as fluid and be as creative as possible.
Tell me something you love about where you come from, your origin.
I first of all, I come from Kindu Bay, Homa Bay County. Huko kwa Wanga, hata kama nachoma saa hii vibaya. But I come from Kindu Bay. Kodidi, I think, is the area. I grew up being called Ayuka Nyakodidi. Ayuka is actually a name that was given to me by my two grandmothers. So my grandpa was polygamist. One time, alioa the Mikai. The Mikai is also my grandmother. So alioa sisters from the same house.
Hey,
Yes. So the first sister alikuwa anaitwa Ayemba. She passed 2 years ago. The second one anaitwa Aringo. So Aringo came to visit Ayemba one day to babysit. In fact, it's something I'm still thinking about writing. She came to Kupiro Japidi.
hey.
She came just to babysit. But then the brothers of Osano saw this woman, how she's very active, and say, Osano, if you let that woman go, you'd have really messed up. So as Aringo is on her way to Nyakach, going back to her home, she is captured by the brothers of Osano and brought back to Osano's heart. And that is how we came to be. That's how my dad came to be, and that's how I am here today.
Mikai did not fight back.
They'd been fighting for some time, but walikubaliana because we are sisters, hey, and we need each other. We must find a way to live. Aringo was very tough. I think that's where I get my toughness from. And there's also Susanna, my maternal grandmother from Kisumu Karateng, hapo daraja mbili. Also a very tough woman, also in a polygamous setup. But Aringo would help Ayemba because Ayemba was not as strong as Aringo. So Aringo would fill in those gaps and fight. And then one of the things that Aringo told me when I was asking about her history, because I want to write it down before she leaves us, she said, one thing that your grandpa used to tell me that he loved me for was that I was industrious. Like he knew I could feed the family. I'd leave home and I'd come back with jam. I'd come back with food for both houses. So that is why Osano loved Aringo. And of course, when there's inequality of love given, there's bound to be strife. But thankfully, in their old age, they managed to reconnect. They're living in the same compound anyway. There's nothing they can do. So you just have to be in each other's business.
This is what's on your shelf, and you'll only hear most of these stories right here. But what do you think? Thank you if you're joining us right now. Today we are seated with Atieno Ochieng,
Yes.
who is our guest on What's on Your Shelf today, who's going to help us traverse the cultural terrain through her shelf. And this, remember, this podcast is brought to you in partnership with the Nuria Bookstore, who are the leading online book sale service in Kenya today, 4 years in a row, and they've been a great support to us. But also remember, this also we do in partnership with the Kenya National Library Service, who are it when you're talking about national library institution. As a country, we are required to all authors who are watching us and those who have books that you deposit 2 copies of your books with the Kenya National Library Service. And this is basically for posterity purposes. This book needs to be available even when you're long gone. And this is the right place for you to do that. But today, we are here to explore and experience the beautiful stories from Atieno, who is going now to answer the question that is one of the most important questions of this show.
Yeah.
What's on your shelf?
Oh, I love that. That's a brilliant question. And honestly, I think that was the thing that got me really excited when we met. We'll start here. I think they're on this thing. This is Holy Book of Netta, Ka. It's been written by David Mailu and a bunch of other associates from African Combs. So this is, he loves to call it an African Bible. Maybe if I can just...
Yeah.
It's an African Bible. And there's a map of Africa showing African states. And these are the names of God, names of God in some across African communities. And the contents of the books, I think this is a book that Africans should have. I know we have the Hebrew Bible. And personally for me, because there's a gap with our history, with our religion, I think this is a book I'd recommend for anyone who is wanting to connect to their roots again. Yeah. So, Ka, the Holy Book of Netta.
What does Ka mean?
I think it's symbolic of the Ankh, you know, the Egyptian Ankh, the cross. I think there's a description over there. I'm reading it slowly. Maybe I can read the first. I think there's a place that describes Ka. It says, in the forward. Today, there's a concrete claim in the scientific world of science and archaeology that the human tree traces its genetic roots and origin in the African continent. If we go by the word creation, then we should say, in the beginning, God created the first human being in the African continent. In other words, Africa now is claimed as the cradle of African human race. So I think this is the Ankh of this. And I need to connect you with David Mailu. I think he'd really fascinate you with how his thought process about Africans and African ideology.
Yeah.
He's written a bunch of books, and we'll see some here. One, of course, that you should be interested in is Our Kind of Polygamy. He's written that as well.
Our Kind of Polygamy.
Our Kind of Polygamy and African Political Ideology. I think you'd
Let me
love that as
understand
well.
when you say Our Kind of Polygamy.
Yes.
What are there different types of
Yes,
polygamy?
Africans have a different kind of polygamy. And that was the one where you bring maybe me and someone else and we live together. But then there's the Western kind of polygamy where you have a wife but you secretly with other people. So now people have given that word to be promiscuity, but in Africa that didn't really augur well with people. So we'd rather bring all the women together It's a book also on my to be read list, so I can't say much about it. But I know there's a kind of polygamy Africans practice that is different from other forms of other forms of society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's also Kenya at 50.
Kenya after 50. This is also on my TBR, to be read list, reconfiguring historical, political, and policy milestones, African histories and modernities. So again, I said there's that gap, and a lot of us for Gen Zs, we are mourning that gap in our history. Was Jomo Kenyatta a collaborator? Was he actually a freedom fighter? Those are the questions that we are asking, and we're finding, maybe what you taught us in school is not very true. But there are people who are actually writing books to explore this, and that's why this is on my
What do you
shelf.
think, based on what you've read? Do you think Jomo Kenyatta was a collaborator?
He was a collaborator. That's the only reason why we have all those pieces of land to one person. You had to be given something. And there's a saying that when a white man is praising you, then it's praising an African man, then there's a big problem somewhere. And actually it is noted in history that Jomo actually fought against the Mau Mau. He betrayed them. So we know he's a collaborator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have also questioned, because when you're looking around at the time when Uhuru Kenyatta was conceived, people say this guy should have been in prison. But how comes the dates the math of Uhuru's birthday don't necessarily add up? But what do you think? What say you? Atieno and I have not read this Kenya
Not
after
yet.
50, but feel free to share with us on the comment section. What do you think? Is there a chance that Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, who is widely spoken to as the founding father of the nation, was he a collaborator? What do you think? What has history documented from where you sit? Feel free to share with us on this comment section. But also, we'll be happy to read these comments. So, Atieno,
Yes.
let me go through now your shelf. What are some of the most impactful books? Who you are
Yeah.
on this shelf?
Who I am on this shelf. I want to start with Mumamanyien.
Mumamanyien.
Yes.
Mumamanyien.
This is a Luo Bible.
Yes.
Translated. The Hebrew Bible translated into Luo. My mom gifted this to me, so it's a prized possession.
Wait, you have Mumamanyien and you have this Milo's Bible.
The African Bible.
Where do these two things meet or go apart?
They're worlds apart, but I think this one doesn't look at one person as the savior, of course, because we know Jesus Christ is widely portrayed as a white man. So this one looks at the customs, chike, customs. Like, there are certain rules that, of course, when you're living as human beings, in a common sense, But then this one is written by Africans. And there are so many things here. The Book of Initiation, the Force of Sex, Sex Knowledge, Sex Teacher, Sword of Sex, Sex Education, and just how that went into how people or young people were taught in the communities. There is one that I read here. There's a book of prophecies. It talks about single parenthood. It talks about good and bad. So basically, everything but glorifying one person. We know we all under God. So God existed before all these missionaries came with the Bible, which was a tool. David Milo believes it was a tool for colonization, and I actually believe the Bible was a tool for colonization. We can see it today even in how disillusioned people are. When you speak about that,
Where does that leave you? Because now there's this gift that your mom has given you
Yes.
that talks about Jesus Christ
Yeah.
as the Savior, and no one goes through the Father
Except
unless
through him.
Jesus. And now you're also reading the African Bible that now contradicts that sort of. Where does that leave you
Well,
now?
it doesn't contradict. And honestly, I think even if you're a Christian, read other books as well. There's no one book that has answers to everything. I have the teachings of Buddha here. So read as widely as possible. You reading one thing doesn't mean, or many things doesn't mean that now it takes away from your faith. It only helps you to understand how other people also perceive themselves. There's one instance I'll give you. In 2020, when COVID struck and we were in school, I was I was a resident assistant, so I had to stay in school to ensure that everyone was safe, everyone was taken care of. And so I had this conversation with two colleagues, one was my roommate and the other one was a neighbor. And they were in my room. And so we started the conversation on religion. And I said, I would really love to know our African customs and traditions before we were inundated, bombarded with this Christian God. Oh, I was almost fought. I'm so glad I came out of that alive, because they're like, oh, you cannot make me question my faith. I'm like, I'm not making you question your faith. All I'm saying is I wish that I knew or understood what our customs were. And I think that is what the Holy Book of Netta is trying to do, showing African people that actually before the missionaries came, we had a way of living. We just didn't document it. You know, that's the thing with African literature as well. It was more oratory, like oral traditions passed down. The white man was very good with, okay, Egyptians did it with the hieroglyphics and all, but now we are seeing a book that is saying, okay, we had our customs. These were what they were before we were introduced to the Bible, the Pauls and the likes. So it's not a disconnect. It just helps to bring everything together because God is one at the end of the day.
What is faith?
Oh, I would have answered that when I was a Christian, but now I don't know. But from the Bible, of course, it says it's the what? Things unheard, believing in things that are unseen. And every day, of course, you have to carry that sort of faith in your work. I believe when you're here on What's on Your Shelf, you have faith that will become a big, big, big podcast. Already you're doing amazing things sitting here in my tiny living room. That's faith. So faith is whatever you want, you bring from the unseen into seen.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you need to be a Christian to have faith. You can have faith as a Muslim, a Buddhist, an atheist, even.
But as somebody who's had a chance to look at both Momayen and Ka,
Yes.
is there an opportunity for these to coexist together and serve?
Oh, yes. That's why I said it's important for Christians not just to read the Bible, but read other books on
The fear is,
religion as well.
you see, I've heard you say, when I was a Christian.
Well,
Yeah.
there are things. It was very tumultuous for me to leave the Christian faith. It was a very tumultuous thing. I think even up to now, and I think I tell people, I told you, I'm using Atieno Ochieng because I want to reconnect. I want to understand, go back to my roots again, and figure out the ways of our people before. It's a grief I can't satisfy, but the only way I can do it is by reading African literature, connecting to people who have lived long enough. Milo is 8 years. He's a diviner. He's an African diviner. So we had those before everything else that we're seeing, the westernization of religion came into being. And while I know many people might not be open-minded about reading other books apart from the Bible, but for everyone who doesn't have that moral dilemma and they're open to opening their minds more, then my shelf would actually really be a good place to start.
Based on the people I've hosted on this podcast, and people have spoken from a wide range, I think I've just not hosted a Buddhist or an atheist. But when you're looking at all these religions, there are people also who've read extensively even into other religions.
Yes.
I don't think there is one particular religion that answers all the questions.
Absolutely. Even a human being does not have all the answers. That's why it's important to be well read. Read as much as you can.
But there's also a struggle of being anchored into a form of religion, or I don't know if I want to call it religion, I want to call it faith. But there is this supreme power that transcends human knowledge and wisdom, that make believe. Where does that leave you? How do you navigate that spectrum?
I think that's why I said I'm still divorcing myself, because I was born in a Christian home, I was raised in a Christian home, and I'm divorcing myself. Actually, there's one thing I was telling my sister. My dad has never stepped, his feet have never stepped into a church. But it's really caused a lot of friction between him and my mother, because my mother wanted for him to change, for him to come to church. And you know how pastors really hammer this thing to women, because women are the majority in churches, let's be honest. And then they're saying, oh, you know, pray for your husband, let him be a changed man. Somehow women always just think their husbands are the problem, but they don't think their radicalization in religiosity. Women are hyper religious most of the time. And I saw this disconnect between them at some point. But my dad would tell her, you go to your church, I pray to my own God, he helps me every day. So why are you having a problem? You just go pray to your own God, I'll pray to my own. And that's the thing, God is a personal thing. So if you need to be anchored somewhere, then, well, it's okay, it's your choice. But then you need to understand that there's a universality of God. And understanding that, it's a process I'm also starting to understand. And I recently, the other day, I felt an urge to pray. And I asked myself, who am I going to pray to? Am I going to pray to God here? Am I going to pray to God who is with me, the universe that I look around to? I don't know. It's a journey that I'm still taking.
Yeah.
And I think through reading and interacting with many people who are practicing African religion, I'm slowly starting to find the answers. I'm not saying that now I will anchor myself on maybe Rastafarianism. I'm like, no, I'm willing to experience God in his universality, not just because of one religion. Yeah, so in his universalness.
What does your mom think about this thought?
I try. I'm an advocate for non-radicalization of religion at home. And I bring many, many, many debates. My mom asks me, I think she said now she's even tired of asking me, did you go to church? Mom, did you go to church? Like, Ma, you know I didn't go to church. But how was church for you today? Oh, he said that. Yeah, there's a way you can still relate. But she's okay. She's made peace with my divorce from the church. She's actually made peace with it. And I'm happy that she did. I was telling my sister that I understand why Mzai work when in a church. I now get it. I get why you used not to go to church, because there's a certain manipulation that happens, especially if you are desperate and just looking for something outside of yourself. Then you'll always fall prey to conniving pastors. And nasikia siku unaitwa dads and moms. If you're desperate, if you do not accept the duality of man, that yes, Atieno can be good, but Atieno can be equally bad. And that's the thing that people go to get prayers for in church. Oh, sijui I did. Yes, you're capable of both sides. Good and evil have to coexist. There's something there's something here in my book. I wrote in Mama Nien. I hope I didn't remove it. That if Satan dies, religion will collapse. If Satan were to die today, religion will collapse. God wouldn't have a meaning. I think that's why God has kept Satan alive for a long time.
Expound on that.
Things have to exist in twos, Mike. Good and bad. There's no light without darkness. Darkness is the first form of it is the state, it's the neutral state, and then light comes in. So they have to be two. You can't have light without darkness and darkness without light. How will you know something is bad if you don't know something is good? How will you know God and how will you know evil? You know?
Atieno, when you're looking at this divorce you're trying to get yourself into,
Yeah.
the journey you are in to divorce yourself from the church,
Yeah.
what would you pin it down to? What has gotten you there? Is it the things you've read? Is it the information you've acquired? Is it a personal experience? How have you found yourself?
Definitely a personal experience, and seeing how men of God carry themselves around their congregants and how they distribute this word of God. Someone will say, "Oh, God told me." When? When did he tell you? And he told you about me and the decisions that you. What? Why didn't this God decide think to put me in the loop? So that you come and tell me, and then now you find people. That's how Shakahola happened. Because God had a particular message for only one special person. I've seen Pastor Moy recently, who wrote or donated 20 million. There are people on the comment section reprimanding one of the, I think, one of the KOT's big wigs. Do you know Pastor Moy has been called by God? He's a friend of God. So, sisi wengine ni akina nani?
Good question.
There's an interesting thing I was telling my mom. In war, let's say the Palestine and the Israeli war, everyone was praying to God. Yeah? So let's say the leopard is praying to God, "God, please let me catch a goat today." And the goat is also praying, "God, let me not be caught by a leopard today." Who will God listen to? Who will God listen to in that?
The person who goes beyond the prayer.
How? What is that? What does that mean?
You see that God cannot just say, "God help." For me, I believe that God listens to the prayer. And in that situation, actually, even in our situation today, we live in that situation where you can either eat or be eaten.
Yes.
And the person who does something about that prayer gets to that goal.
Does something like what? So it means that
goat cannot just pray to say, "Oh God, help the leopard not to eat me," and then you're sleeping there. You have to take off. You have to try and run away from that leopard.
So the leopard is running, the goat is also running.
Yes.
So
the
who does
leopard
God
also
help?
cannot just sit and say, "God, give me a sumptuous meal for today. I will die in hunger." And then you just sleep, and then a goat falls onto your laps.
But then I'm looking at this from the point of justice and injustice.
Yes.
How many Kenyans have cried for justice from God? And yet we see the systems being perpetuated to continue oppress our people. So who is God listening to?
Who is God listening to?
Exactly. Let's not answer that today.
It's a hard question.
It is a hard question.
And I don't think I have the answer.
And that is where people, or let's say young people, I'm going to say young people, are finding it hard. I don't want to speak on behalf, where Atieno is finding a disconnect. I must say, I've seen how God has worked in my life. Through the opportunities. I grew up in a humble background, and now I'm here. I can speak to people. The positions that I've been in. There was an instance. I was so deep into this fanaticism and psychophancy of religion. I was supposed to be traveling to Australia. I was a keynote speaker for a Rotary event. Msichana wenyewe hakukuwa na ni measles na yellow fever. Nikasema nini, God has ordained this journey. Nothing will stop this journey. Luckily, let me say God, for those to pacify the ears of people who might think I am I'm still in the divorcing period. There's a friend who said, "Tracy, don't be stupid. You think the customs at Kenya Airways will know that God has ordained this journey, so they will just let you pass? No, stop being stupid. Go get your passport. Go get your yellow fever certificate." And I think that was very important. It woke me up to that veil. People, there's some Christians who are such sycophants. Pastor alisema, if I do this, this will happen. So they give the money, but then nothing happens. And then it's just something that the pastor milks year in, year out. The pastor is growing. The sheep, mchungaji ana grow, but the sheep is dwindling. The sheep are not doing well. So there's that discrepancy that I just can't get over.
From what I can hear, I feel like there can be another conversation
Oh, yeah.
that seeks to deeply understand
The
the
divorce.
position of your heart.
Yes.
That is something that I feel like still needs to happen, especially being that it's a journey.
Yeah.
Because you love God. You can trace, you can see and say, I have seen certain
Oh,
things
yeah, absolutely.
that has happened
Oh,
in
yeah.
my life.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, I feel like now, based on the response you've given, also there is human error. There is human error that has led you to where you are.
Yeah.
And I feel like those two are things that most of the time need a very specific address.
Of
Like
course.
yeah,
And
it's
that's where the metaphysical comes. That's where you know that God is within you, not outside you. Hence, we don't need elaborate church structures because God is just manifesting himself through us, you know. And understanding, again, the duality of a human being. You can be equally good and equally as evil. You just have to know darkness and light have to exist together, yin and yang.
yeah.
That's why it's important to read about other cultures. There's a way the Chinese do it, the fish, the yin and yang, darkness and light. But somehow, for those who are sycophants of religion, they just tend to think, no, I'm always a good person. So even if you wrong this person or they wrong you, ni wewe vengeance will happen in you. Oh God, revenge on my behalf. Hey, Mike did this to me. But then you are blind to take accountability because somehow you're on God's camp, and if you're on God's camp, you don't do any wrong. I think that is the manipulation and the sycophancy that just doesn't sit well with me anymore.
What do you think? What's your take on? I know the conversation on religion can go for hours.
It's tasty,
because it's
yeah.
very emotive.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's somebody who's watching us today who is either agreeing or religion is one of those places where you either fully agree or fully disagree.
Oh yes.
Most of the time, people barely found themselves somewhere in between.
Well, for Africans, we are a peculiar lot. This was a religion that was introduced to us. So it's God existed before the missionaries came, and I think that is where my heart is leaning towards. Because then, if the Bible was used to colonize me, how then can I worship this God who allowed for slavery to happen for all these years? Because one day it will get better.
Let us know what you think. This is what's on your shelf. Atieno Ochieng here with us today. I have to say, the next book I want to talk about, this is the book that introduced me to you.
Yes.
And this past Sunday, like most of the Sundays at Nuria Bookstore, there was a book reading. And yours truly, Atieno here, was the moderator in that book reading. And the book they were reading is this, Rough Silk. And I'm delighted looking at the conversations that happened in that place. But now I found it on your shelf. Tell us about Rough Silk.
Rough Silk is a coming of age story of Deborah Aukotendo. It's an interesting book. It talks about many things about the Luo Nation. I wouldn't want to talk much in depth about it because we are currently working on the book at Voa Press. That's our imprint of Ikitabu. But it's an interesting book. Definitely worth the read. Like, you can see the motions. And one of the subjects that always pops up is polygamy. And the statistics, I think it was last week, they're saying that Nairobi women, 50% would consider a polygamous setup. The character in this book actually marries, it's consecutive polygamy. So the wife is at home, and then he's in Nairobi, so he needs somebody to make his bed warm. It doesn't work out, he brings another. There's that thing that happens. So there are many women that I've mentioned that are married to the main character in this book. But going back to the statistics of polygamy and why 50% of modern women would prefer to be in polygamy is something that could it has shocked many people, definitely. But I think people are going back to how the tenets, the basic tenets of marriage and why it worked like that before. Yeah, so it's definitely an interesting book if you are interested to know about the Luo culture, even though I have my biases because I'm a Luo. I think I have my own point of view of a Luo woman and a Luo culture. So yeah, it's an interesting.
What's your take on polygamy?
My take, in what sense? Ask the question.
What's your take on polygamy? How do you view polygamy?
Wow, this question has been coming for long. I think I've had this conversation sana with a friend, and when I told her, polygamy was to ensure that women didn't lack husbands. Of course, she also disagreed to some point, but I'm like, think about it. The population, wanawake Kenya, we are 1 million times more than men. And so where will the rest of the women get husbands if that were a question to ask, if that were a valid question to ask? But personally, I don't have an issue with polygamy. I exist today because of polygamy, thanks to my grandpa, rest in peace. If Osano wouldn't have checked out a ringo that day, I wouldn't have existed. Probably there would have been someone in my place and Nayemba would just have her kids. But polygamy, I think many Africans can relate to the fact that they come from polygamous homes. At least if not their father immediately, maybe their grandfather was polygamous. And for me, both my maternal and paternal sides were polygamous. Susanna, I think, was the third wife. And this was a very tumultuous woman as well. She was very turbulent, very opinionated, and songs have been written about her, about her hair, her legs, So I
Your grandma?
Yeah, my grandma. She was a baddie. She was a Karateng village baddie.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I don't have an issue with polygamy. Oh, you want to ask me if I would consider being in a polygamous setup? Should we go there?
But we will get there. But now when you read the book, when you look through the text of the book, what is the book saying? Because you see now, this is one of those conversations that I feel like people are forced to say whether they are for or against.
Yes.
But I don't really think that should be the question of for or against. I would really seek to understand why was it embraced as a culture, and how comes then both males and females alike supported it as a culture or as a way of life?
That's our way. That's the African way of living, Mike. People live, and let's say Ubuntu in marriage as well. That's our way of living. That's how we found it being done. Mike would be the head of the home, and you'd bring in many other women because women are industrious. I told you, Aringo told me that one of the things that Osano confessed that he loved her was because she was industrious. Women are industrious. So imagine having 8 women who are all tilling the land, they're bringing kids, and you have to look at the fact that kids and women were a source of wealth. That was how somebody was considered a wealthy person. Look at Akuku Danger with his 100 wives and 500 children. That was an extremely wealthy man. If the daughters were to be married, then you see, you're bringing in more. And then it means you have free labor, so they'll be tilling the land, the food will be much. So that is why polygamy was embraced. So the more you have, the more women and children you have, of course, the more wealth you have. Right now, women are more empowered. Women are working for their own money, and not that they don't need a man, but there's that protection that comes with being somebody's wife. Of course, let me just say it like that. But if women wanted, but most still prefer to be in those because we need community. We need to be with other people. It was embraced because that was just our way of life.
Do you think empowerment takes that away?
No. If we have we're in 2025, Mike, and 50% of men are saying they want polygamous setups, then that means something. That means that there's something about.
So was it
this that
50% of general population? Because you see, most of the time, polygamy has also been really associated with the Luos. And also our friends in Mas Island are also
Oh, come
associated a
on.
lot.
I think it's because just people like to propagate stereotypes. Kisis are Wakikuyu, but of course you've seen that the sons of Mumbis have tried, but most of them usually just end up dead if you try that nonsense. Many communities are polygamous. Luyas are polygamous. Um, let me just say, it might be controversial. It is not in the nature of men and women to be monogamous unless it's like convenient. Like, why are we coming together? Like Mike and Tracy, why are we coming together? You know? But if I had the option, I'd have as many partners as I wanted.
I hear you. I choose to leave that conversation there. What do you think? What are your takes, ladies and gentlemen? This is what's on your shelf. Today we're sitting with Tracy, Atieno, Ochieng. When you look at rough silk,
Yeah,
when you talk about Luo culture, it's a very wide scope.
it is wide.
There's so much that I don't think can even be captured in one single book.
Yeah.
But when you're looking at this, what is that one thing that you think holds the spine of this book, that holds the spine of this story for that person who can say, I want to look for that book?
I think the role of fatherhood in the life of a daughter. My dad was very impactful in my life. I remember even how I love to make myself up in how I choose to wear my hair. My dad had a lot of say in that. He loved my hair. So he'd bring me these cute butterflies. We used to live in Madare, but he'd find these very intricate, so beautiful butterflies to put on my hair, to adorn on my hair. So when my mom would threaten to shave my hair, oh, that would be war in the house. There would be war in the house. Like, don't you dare touch her hair. So that's something that I relate to because my dad and I are quite close. There's something that happened, of course, that when you start growing up, mnakwarozana kidogo, personality issues. But then the role of fatherhood is very important in this story, and how, I don't know, are you a present dad? Do you have children?
Yes, I do.
You have a daughter.
I have daughters.
What would you do for them?
I would say for now, everything.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that is what Auko did for Tendo. Like, in as much as it will be revealed later, other family dynamics, Auko really was a present dad. And that's something I must laud Luo men for. And maybe let me laud my dad. I don't know how many Luo men are present, but my dad was present through and through, regardless of how.
What did that do to you as a person?
Or to me,
Yeah.
first of all, I loved the fact that he was my biggest fan. He'd tell me we'd be watching a news and Catherine Kasavul would come up. I'm like, oh, mom, hey, mama, now you'd be like her one day. Actually, I never thought I'd be a journalist. I just wanted to be a teacher like my mother. But then I got into journalism, and somehow it felt like the dream that he had came to pass. But having a dad that speaks life into you, oh, there's nothing like a father's love to a daughter. Yeah, your mother can be there, but there's that bond that daughters and dads have that is very important. I never wanted to disappoint my dad, ever. So as I'm working hard, as I'm studying in school, it's my dad that I didn't want to disappoint. I don't know. It wasn't because he was also strict, but there's a friendliness that we had between us. We could talk. We could talk in a way that he could not talk with the rest of my siblings. So he trusted me, I trusted him. And I've seen how, of course, he had his own faults. Like I said, human beings have two sides. And I can see somehow in how I choose the men I choose to be in relationships with, they kind of resemble my dad in a bad way. But then also, I know that this is something that I wouldn't want in a man, because I've seen it through my dad. So it just gave me a perspective on a man's love towards the daughter. So when I see men who aren't stepping up for their daughters, I'm like, your daughters are really missing a lot. They really need that male figure to like just be there. It's important for a man to be there for their daughter. Yeah.
I would say so for a man,
Yeah.
for the boy,
Yeah.
because I think every boy wants to be like the father.
Oh yeah.
This remains the best example you have, the strongest person you know. What are you telling me?
Yes.
My dad will come for you.
Yeah.
And I feel like with where the society is going today, there's a lot of singlehood, and I feel like a lot of singlehood has been spoken passionately about, which I tend to disagree. Everybody deserves both parents.
Or everybody deserves, if the environment allows. If it doesn't, then don't force it, because children will pick on it. If there's one thing, of course, there's a lot of abuse also in the book, and the abuse that I also saw growing up. Yes, my dad as a dad, he was great, but my dad as a husband, questionable, And at some point, we always wondered, what if mom left? Probably would have had a very different future. But she chose to stay and endure that abuse. And that's what I'm saying. I'm seeing how that choice now reflects in how I also pick my partners. Yeah.
But then that makes me ask, what defines a good man? And I'm talking about you who's now looking for this man, or hoping that this man will say good things that will make me want to settle. What is in that man?
First of all, number one, Mike, let me just say, I don't listen to words. I listen to actions. And I think for me, a man should be responsible. Same, equally, but now there's an expectation for the man you want to be with to be more responsible than you. But not, of course, notwithstanding the flaws, you have to also give room for them to be flawed human beings. Responsibility is the most important to me, and of course, have your shit together. We at least try to have your.
You see, most of these things change later in life.
Yes.
Most of these questionable characteristics show up later. They are not things you'll see. I'll meet Atieno today, and I can already tell the potential of being a good woman or not. But what are these things that you want to see on the first instance that makes or breaks a deal for you?
Oh my God, I love a good shave. Like, please, that just tells me you love yourself. And when you love yourself, I know you love me too. If you cannot keep yourself kempt, that's a turn off. It's a red flag. And there's one person I tried to actually give an opportunity. I don't even want to remember.
Hey.
I tried to date out of the norm. And I was shown shege. I was shown pepe.
Hey. But maybe the raw is clean. Naweza kuwa niko.
Hapana. I like a man who is well. That's responsibility to yourself. I'll step out looking. I'll try.
Ladies also say they like rough edges. No things that.
No, rough edges somewhere else when you are in the chambers, but not when. Oh, surely. No. Me.
Aya. You want to talk to Atieno, enda kinyozi kwanza.
Enda kinyozi. And smell nice.
Smell nice, please.
Smell nice.
Put
And
on that color.
I have nice shoes. Yes.
Okay. All right. But now you've spoken about our statistics.
Yeah.
That leads me to the next question.
Yeah.
Or the next book. Nairobi. This is where 50% of girls would not mind being in a polygamous setting.
First of all, Nairobi is an interesting book, yeah. It's a book that talks about gangsters, prostitutes, gangsters in uniform, that's the police, and how these people are interconnected. It also it humanizes these characters, showing them to be people other than their vices. The main character, a man, it's called Boss. I love Boss. He's very gentle, but he's also very fierce. He is the criminal boss in Nairobi, but also a lover boy. You know, he tries at least, but you can see from the first page that something very nasty happens to him. And I think that's where we forget that our boy children also need protection. As we're talking about pedophiles, we're also talking about wale nannies who slept with those kids, and you listen to men and they talk about this bragging, and you're like, that's not okay. That person actually defiled you when you're in grade 5, grade 6. You shouldn't have been doing that. You're a child. But then men will celebrate this and say, yes, that was my first time. But then that's very sad. So this book humanizes these characters. We have Didi in here, but it's a woman. Somehow, I call her Didi because, of course, she has the tapes, but she really helps the women in the sex work world, because she provides a haven, and that's for them not to be abused, for them not to be taken advantage of. So in a way, she helps them. So you find that every character has a unique story. When you see that prostitute on River Road, do you immediately judge her, or do you ask, interesting, what would have brought her here? Some people would say, oh, I'd have done anything other than prostitution. What if you didn't have a choice? That is the question everybody begs to answer. What are the circumstances that draw people there, that make them who they are?
Is it a justification?
It's not a justification, but it is a lens, a perspective that many people might not have. There's something I'd like to say. It might not be your perspective, but it's true. It's somebody's story. So it's not justifying. Besides, they don't need to tell you or explain to you why they do whatever they do, as long as they're at peace with themselves. For us is to, before we point fingers, like, what led you there? It's good to have that environment where people can tell their story. Yeah.
What stood out for you in this one?
That gangsters can also fall in love. It was interesting because we have a lot of men who pretend they're so macho. You know, for them, they don't feel.
Yeah, you told gangsters
Very.
don't fall in.
Now, Boss was. I wish they met Boss. This is why I love books, because you get into a whole universe and you're like, what? This is a universe of gangsters and prostitutes falling in love, and they actually treat each other with respect. Something that normal human beings might not accord you.
When you look at the city's ecosystem,
Yeah.
and you've spoken about that ecosystem of police, the gangsters, the prostitute, what would you say this book brought to you that perhaps maybe you had not looked at that way?
Oh, that hawker on the streets who is selling sweets year in, year out might actually be a CIA agent or a marijuana peddler. That, by the way, you look at them, and appear at the slums. I told you I was raised in Mathare, and I try to go often to visit, and it's the same. Like, but we have an MP, we have a CDF fund, we have all these programs coming to help the ghettos, but somehow the ghettos remain the same. Somehow interconnected with crime, because you saw that there's a documentary. Is it a documentary? An investigative piece on KTN on how gangsters in Mathare would be hiding behind. Kuna pali walikuwa wamevunja, time walikuwa wanahamisha watu kwa river. The gangsters now hide in those buildings, stabbing a man who was taking his child to work. And the police are protecting these gangsters. So you know the killer of your husband, but because they are working with the police, there's nothing you can do. justice is just not given to anyone because the police, the gangsters in uniform now, are protecting the actual gangsters. And for what? Why do we have justice systems when we have web, this web that's connected to ensure that people actually don't get justice?
But isn't it how we are cultured as a people?
Cultured?
Because when it's easier to point out that criminal who lives in the neighborhood and people are okay, people know this is a thug, people know that this is a prostitute, and people tend to justify the fact that, oh, is also somebody's child, is also somebody's daughter, brother, and something, which is okay. But that is the same way we look at politicians. The politicians are stealing left, right, and center. There are places where we know that this person was not this wealthy 6 months ago. Today, they have ballooning resources. And you know very well that this has been stolen. And we hope that he can steal enough so that we can benefit. The other person is always just bad if you're not associated.
Oh, yeah.
The gangster, the prostitute, the police officer, the politician, they are as bad as they are not associated with me.
Of course, that's a brilliant point. That's a brilliant point. I couldn't add anything to that. You hit the nail on the head. Yeah.
You've spoken about Nairobi, and time and again you kept saying, Mike, this one. So we'll come back to that.
That's a good book. You should read it.
Yes. You also mentioned somebody here, David Mailu. You've spoken about David Mailu fondly.
That man is literary genius. That one I give it to him.
Yes.
Props to him. David Mailu, 51 years later. I don't know if people can see the cover of this book. This was after 430 was written 51 years ago.
51 years ago.
51 years ago. I got my hands on it last year. And I read it. And I asked my managing editor and those who had read it, was this a 2024 book? And I'm like, no, it was written in 1974. And actually it was banned in Tanzania and South Africa. And people who were reading it in Kenya would actually remove the covers because they said it was so scandalous. On the blurb of this book, it says, you're likely to find 3 copies of this book within one family. For when the husband is reading it, he doesn't want his wife to know he's reading it. When the wife is reading it, she doesn't want her husband to know she's reading it. And finally, when the mature children are reading it, they don't want the parents to know that they're reading it. Why? Find out. So this book is it's a highly feminist book. It's actually our book of the month at Books in Africa. And I was asking you, men cannot speak about women, but he said it has to be a woman who has lived in a woman's body, so I get it. But actually people thought that this book was written by a woman. If you peruse the pages, I don't know if I can, it's...
Read it.
I always want to start with the first chapter because the first chapter always introduces you to the after 430 universe. I think I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs very quickly because it's written in verse form. Call me Emily Katango. That's me. The gate into my kingdom opens wide. Men don't like me. They say I'm loose. I look for a doctor to tighten me somehow down there where men have loosened me in this unfair game of hit and run. If I'm losing body, am I losing spirit too? Let me pass. I'm stuck naked like this, and I may deal with men ruthlessly. A witch is at her best hard nude, for genitals at delivery don't need covering. Masters of men are women, but conquerors of women are men. Women built their prisons by giving birth to men. Nevertheless, for men to read spiritual scriptures and pay tribute to demands, men must enter the church between woman's legs as payment for survival. That is after 430.
Why did it hit you so hard?
As you progress reading it, it asks vital questions. We are looking for equality right now, and 2/3 gender equality. And one thing that also the Holy Book of Netta, you remember we used to have men sitting and deciding things of men, women sitting, even though it wasn't championed for as much, sitting and deciding things of women. So this book suggests there should be two parliaments: parliament for men, parliament for, actually three: parliament for women, and a parliament for the youth, because the youth understand the problems that they go through. Women understand the problems that they go through. Men as well understand the problems that they go through. But what we have now, so when you hear female politicians, and I largely attribute that to men always internalized misogyny. So men have erected themselves to be the masters who know. That's why the book says masters of women are men. So we have women who are propagating policies that they know will hurt their fellow women and will not say a damn thing because the man is supreme somehow in thought. They do not care to think that, oh, my fellow woman, I'm privileged, but my fellow woman in Samburu might not be going through the same thing as I am. So what are the policies I can ensure that are passed to safeguard the livelihoods of all these men, of all these women? If a woman is called a prostitute, what is a man?
Bless her. A sponsor.
But that one is better, right?
Yeah.
But a prostitute, oh, they will drag you. A side chick, oh my goodness. But boy toys, that one is. But a woman, you're selling your body. Don't you respect yourself? Don't do this to your body. So that is why it's a highly. I can't explain the genius of After 4:30 and David Milo and how he brings the plight of women.
Yeah.
I think he hit the nail on the head with the violence that women are going through, with the gaslighting housewives go through. So the boss can splash on this secretary, but akirudi nyumbani, he has no love for the wife. And the wife is saying, I just want that attention. Why can't you give that attention to me? So it covers the corporate woman, the sex worker, because we already know sex workers, it's an old form of occupation. Like it dates millennials. It covers a woman who's just finding her identity. And there's one thing also about language. He asks, does darling have the same impact as mpenzi? Language is also incorporated there. So it's a book that is really, for young people, we're just discovering it. I think Gen Zs are loving After 4:30. They're like, oh my God, was this book written last year? How is it that the 1974 woman has the same issues as a 2025 woman?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing. 51 years, but nothing has changed. 2/3 gender rule tulipitisha constitutionally how many years ago? We're still struggling with it. In fact, we have women who do not even want to elect. They're ensuring that women are seen as incompetent.
Yeah. Talking about women, we're in the season of celebrating the International Women's Day. And actually, something special is that this year, we are on the 30th year since Beijing. Actually, time has passed so fast.
Mm.
So those of us who are alive 1995, when the women went to Beijing, and I think that is where now the gender rights movement, I think it got a major boost globally and a wave that to date people keep referring to. Yeah. And actually today we are 30 years down the line.
Interesting.
But now it's interesting when you're talking about the struggles of
1974
woman being similar to the struggles of a 2025 woman. Yeah. Has this rights movement or this gender conversation yielded any fruit from where you sit?
I think Yeah, women now can go to school, women can own land, women can inherit land from their parents. Well, it's done a lot. But then we forget that gender is not a woman's thing only. Gender should encompass both sexes, the man and the woman.
Yeah.
And I think that's where people now somehow, not somehow, they say, oh, the man has been forgotten, boy child has been neglected. But it's because we attributed gender to mean woman. That's where we got it wrong. So it should have been, how do we, the equality, not the equity, like if it's job opportunities, let it be available to both genders. If we are talking about political ambitions, let the woman also, if we're going to talk about equity, yes, let the woman and man face it at the ring together. But of course we must also remember that we've had misogyny and patriarchy. It's a man's world, they said. So we have to find our way as women, not just to be subjects kuwazindikisha kwa hii maisha. So we also have to still continue fighting in those spaces and occupying space. And women are doing that in literature. These are two women. This is one man. And if you look at we'll go through it and kidogo, you'll see
Yeah.
most of the authors here are actually women.
Yeah. But then you as an individual, looking at your practice as a journalist, have you encountered experiences that you'd say being a woman was a disadvantage?
I love being a woman, Mike. I think that's why I'm not a radical feminist. I wouldn't want to carry that anger. It's okay. Yeah, we understand that certain injustices have been propagated and still continue to be propagated, like genital mutilation, early marriage. Yeah, there's so many things that women still go through, but absolutely love being a woman in 2025. There's so many opportunities for us. Mastercard Foundation. I was asking, KCB, when I was still practicing as a journalist in the media station, and 70% of scholarships are actually going to women. So I asked, where are the men? Because I'm seeing women here. Great, we like to celebrate that, but where are the men? So 30% only goes to men. And even as they are front running these people who are doing exemplarily well, men are no show, or they don't bring them up because women have been given something called kipaumbele. So we've been empowered, and that's great. So I absolutely love being a woman. There's nothing a woman can't do in 2025. We have women in tech, we have women in engineering fields, in fields that were predominantly male. So I absolutely love being a woman and embracing that feminine energy and basking in it fully, fully, fully. That's why I need the blessings of my ancestors. Yes.
But now when you look through your shelf, are there some female authors who inspired you with your work?
Yes. Inspiration is a big word.
Yeah.
Let me say they've impacted the way I see the world. Joan Thatia. I'll start with Kenyan and then I'll go to Nigeria. When I first read Confessions of Nairobi Men, I wept. I wept for the boy child. I was depressed actually for a few weeks. I couldn't imagine what I was reading and how men suffer in silence. Talk about abuse, molestation, in divorce, the inequities. And I understand why some men like Silas Nyanchwani is like anti-marriage. I understand because you read this book and it gives you a voice that you never hear, and it's the voice of a man. You'll read in Sexercised, the perspective of a man. I actually reading this was very challenging because I'm like, I'm kind of used to the female voice. Yeah, the female voice is oppressed, the female voice is coming of age, the female voice is being empowered. But then you read this, and the male voice is being diminished. There's no breakthrough for men unless there's silence in this book. So this broke me. It changed how I saw Nairobi, and it allows me to extend more grace to men. It really does. So Joan Thatia definitely did a number on me. Tomorrow I Become a Woman by Iwanose Odafen. I had highlighted somewhere where we play there's this song that we used to sing utolewa na sijui na nani daktari sijui nani nani. We used to play that song as kids as yeah. It's chapter 5. We learned to skip rope and took turns playing When Will You Marry? Purposely tripping when we had doctor and falling down in fits of laughter when others missed their steps at carpenter or plumber. You will cry in this book. And for women, usually are portrayed as subservient. There's something interesting I discovered on the internet. It's called the eternal myth of womanhood. Is it the eternal myth of womanhood? The eternal myth of womanhood. So the eternal myth of womanhood by Simone, he's French, I cannot pronounce the other, is that women are subservient, women suffer, women have to take that other place for them to be women, They need to be devoted mothers, devoted wives, leave everything. Put everything aside for the sake of your husband and your children. And that is how many women are portrayed in many African works. They are always suffering, the ever suffering women. But this one, you will cry. This one, it just shows that, again, if you're religious, yeah, this one you might not like. You might not like, okay, fine, because the husband is a deacon in the church, but treats the women and children badly, like worse than what a pagan or an atheist could, all in the name of, I'm a big person in the church, so you gotta respect me, and my word is final, If there's any failure, then it's you as the woman who didn't prepare me as a man to be my best. And it's always interesting when men seek the attention of women so much. I find it very interesting that they have to perform before women. That's even sex in Sinners is very performative. When the man fails to deliver, and she says there should be no rest for the wicked who promise good sex but don't deliver. Men, honestly, the performative nature of men when they're around women is just crazy. But then there's something also called homosexuality, where men also seek the approval of their fellow men. Homosexuality, not sexuality.
You guys get that right.
Homosociality. So some men will only be around men who they think highly of. So they cannot date someone unless they're boys. Mbogi, mekubali. I think for girls we also have that. But I think for men it's picked on subwards. I don't know if it's something that's not expected. I don't know. But it's something that's kind of homosociality.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the myth of the eternal feminine, all suffering. Half of a Yellow Sun. This one goes through the Biafran War and the atrocities that were meted on the Igbo nation. As Luos, I think, or as a Luo personally, I have a crazy attraction to Nigerian men.
Okay.
I honestly, but I'm trying. After seeing what is it Faith went through, but this one also kind of gave me an idea of the Nigerian history and how and why Western literature is doing so well. These people are so deep in their history; they know their history, and they write books so that people don't forget. I'm looking for, I know Nuria is talking them, and I need to read them. The Luo Nation, the culture, I need to know. And I love how Chimamanda does this in Half of a Yellow Sun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chimamanda right now looks like he's a front runner in
African literature. Yeah. But actually, I'd say one woman who changed my perception, and of course, thanks to being forced to read books in high school, was Margaret Ogola. A River and the Source. I actually got to play a Coco, and people actually thought I was a strong Coco. So I think I carried the spirit of a Coco with me. That book, I think I read it before we got to Form 3 palimna sasa kuandika mambo za sijui who said this. I think I read the book like 10 times.
Yeah.
And I thoroughly related to the strength that Akoko imbued. So, yeah, Margaret, I don't have it here, River and the Source, but it was a really good book for me.
Yeah.
I think we're almost. I need to talk about Nyabo from Uganda, Goretti. Hey, this book is gisty. It talks about marriage. It talks about desire for love. You know, right now people are so macho. They don't want love. They are very cautious. Red flags all over the place. Kila mtu ni red flag. But then even with the red flags, Vera still loves Eric. And the things that Eric does are very questionable. If there's questionability, Eric takes the day. Like he wins. I gave him that throne. Yeah, but Vera still loves Eric, and they maneuver the life of marriage together. It's very gisty. Very, very gisty.
What stands out for you? Because I think before even we sat down, this is one of the books you had spoken about so fondly.
Because it's gisty. Like she's telling you a story like you are with her here today. Yeah, she's telling you, my name is Vera. I'm 29 years old. I want to let you know that I've fallen in love with the man of my dreams, my Prince Charming. I'm sold. Tell me, I want stories about love. Talk to me about love. People are so cold these days, so I love that book so much. And I read it in my roommate's ex-roommate's voice because she was Ugandan. Hey, Bambi, I don't know what. Banange. This book is gisty. If you're looking for a quick weekend read, that's the one. That's the one.
But now when you're looking at all this, looking at the literature that you've interacted with before, looking at that literature ecosystem, today you work in a books world. You books is your day job.
My day job.
But now when you're looking at all these things, do you think that the African women's voices have been well documented?
Oh yes, and you can see the books. African women are writing. You know, you can see with diaries. African women are writing, Mike. Let no one lie to you that there is no space. African women are writing. In fact, one of us, our senior publishing manager, was just nominated at Publish Her Award. So we are hoping that she wins. But you can see that there's effort and there's intentional investment to make sure that a woman's voice is heard. Of course, we're going back to the fact that women were to be seen, not heard. So now we have the platform and are being told, occupy the space. Take it up. You want to be in broadcast, do it. You want to write books, do it. You anywhere in tech, women's voices are being amplified. But of course, we cannot be blind to the fact that other women still don't have the opportunity to tell their stories the way they want to.
Yeah.
First of all, it's because of censorship and what women can write and talk about. So we are still having those issues. I was moderating a session at the African Media Festival with my friends who are persons with albinism. And now they're venturing into the podcasting space because now people from that community need to see that representation. But to see the comments of people and how they relate to this woman with albinism, it's very degrading. So podcasting is offering a space to bypass the gatekeepers. Self-publishing. In fact, most of these books here are self-published apart from Nairobi, yeah. And When Love Says Goodbye. These are the only ones that I have that have been, and Unpaid Bride Prize, that have been published traditionally. But the fact that women are writing and they're putting out their books, self-publishing, then it means the ecosystem has grown and women are being embraced more and more.
How do you think the evolution in the digital ecosystem is shaping African literature?
Oh, I love to talk about that. Book Talk. Do you know Book Talk? So Book Talk is a platform in TikTok community that just looks at books. If you go on TikTok, for those who are listening to us, we have a TikTok platform called Books in Africa. I also have my own personal channel called Ayuka Nyakodidi, where I do the books that I read, because some books I read are not from work. And book talk is really revolutionizing how African literature is being consumed. Really, because you'll find book recommendations and you're like, yeah, I would love actually to read that book. And it's just in the placement, the music that is used, the visuals. Somebody is reading in a cafe. Like for me, I'd be in the house probably. When I used to live in Thika Road, I would take my time, the commuting time, to read a book. So I always had a book in hand and post on TikTok. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I'd love to read that book. So the digital space has changed. I don't even know where we're going to go with the digital space, but it's doing a lot for our African authors. Those who would not be known will be known because somebody will feature their book. So TikTok, first of all, props to TikTok. It's changing the game for African publishing.
Yeah, talking about tick on the talk. What's on your shelf also is TikToking.
Yeah.
And you'll find us also on all social media platforms. You're What's on Your Shelf on Instagram. And now where you're watching us on YouTube, have you subscribed? Actually, I want to take advantage of this conversation to say, if you're yet to subscribe to our channel, please do subscribe, because this helps us assure you and give you better conversations. Not to mean that the ones we've had were not good, but the bigger the community grows, the more this team that is seated here feels obligated to keep making it better, to keep improving it. And you are part of this community and can help us grow and reach that attainable height that we so desire. But now when you're looking at this whole conversation on how the voices of African women have been portrayed or have been documented, what's your take? What do you think? What are still the gaps? Because as we're marking the International Women's Day today, we are 30 years actually from Beijing. And it's easier to keep talking about the gender rights, and gender mean both gender, male and female, and thinking about the perspectives, because there are other narratives that are also saying that the 21st century woman is so empowered that the boy of a similar age is struggling to match up. But what is your take? What are the gaps that we are seeing in this whole gender ecosystem that are worth noting? And where is the best place that have been documented, if not the books? But let us engage and let us have this conversation. Feel free to share your thoughts and feedback here on the comment section. But also you can reach us through our social media pages, as we've both shared. And I'm sure Atieno and I will have an opportunity to discuss the things that you're going to write. So this, I want to promise you, that we will look for her and we'll have an opportunity to share in the things that you've spoken about. But Atieno, when you're looking at this whole, one of the things that people fail to admit, that books are also expensive. As a books marketer, how do you navigate this ecosystem where now needs are competing? We are selling this idea of people immersing themselves in knowledge, which is a good thing, but there are also competing needs. When you look at this shelf, more than 100,000 shillings have gone into the books on this shelf. And while you're buying one book, might be easier to ignore the fact, but when you look at it cumulatively, it's expensive.
Yes.
As a bookseller, what are some of the strategies that you employ to ensure that with these tough economic times, people are still open to consuming knowledge?
First of all, I think anyone who invests in reading is investing for a lifetime. I think people should not play about getting knowledge. People should strive, at least, try to have a few books. Try to have a few books in your library. About affordability, yes, the issue of accessibility has been an issue. And that is why books are coming in different forms. There's the ebooks, there's the audiobooks, and there's a print form. Like for eKitabu or Mvua Press, because Mvua Press are imprint, what we do, our mission is to make sure that the bestsellers that are coming from Africa hit in Africa first. So that is our mission. And the only way we can achieve that is if the books are affordable. So for the Apple has not booksellers pia, bookstores, you know, so that when you're coming, isikuwe pia tuna compete now na inakuwa disadvantage. But books must be made affordable. Like Narabari Cocktail, I think goes for 1,500. I think there's no book of ours that goes, it's like 2,000 shillings, because we want everyone to be able to afford these books. But then it's a thing that needs to be consolidated with everyone in the publishing industry. Price has for a long time been a hindrance. But I know there's someone who's saying, because people have said Africans don't read, but people would stand by kwa stalls and even just read a chapter a day. I know people prefer to buy bread than buy a book, but then we must also encourage people through digital marketing and content creation that it is worth that 2,000 that you probably would have just lost somewhere buying Chipomwitu and stuff like that. It's something it should be like a personal choice to at least get a book a month, at least a book a month. It might not be something too extravagant here. In fact, because gosh, yeah, this collection is good. I could sell it at some point when the original books are being looked for.
There's an aspiring writer who is watching you today. What advice would you give this person that can help them?
Just write. Just that. There's nothing else I can tell you. Because if you're going to approach a traditional publishing house and you say, oh, I want to write, they'll ask you, what? Where is it? What have you written? So write. And then give some random people. Don't give your friends, they might pacify you. Fine, give your friends, but then give someone else.
Yeah.
To see if there's a story there. But write.
But if you look through your shelf, which book would you say you would want to belong to in any young African woman's shelf?
After 4:30.
After 4:30.
This one is a must-have for every African woman. I dare to say every African woman should read after 4:30. If you're 25 and below, you should read after 4:30.
Yeah.
If you're 30 and above, read after 4:30. Another book that I would definitely advocate for. I loved Sinners. It's naughty. But if you look beyond the naughtiness...
Who are the sinners? Just curious.
You have to read it. Ama ulize Sarah Halu atakwambia. But Sinners, if you can get over the steamy scenes, you'll see there's very important message. And there's one here before you enter the contents. The next page, anasema, some fake happiness, some fake sadness, and some fake an orgasm. Which one are you?
All right. What's your take? What do you think? Atieno Ochieng with us today.
Yes.
Some people call her Tracy. But where can somebody find your work? Where can somebody find you?
Yes, you can find most of my articles on books in Africa at ikitabu.com. You can find me on TikTok at ayukanyakodidi. You can find me on Instagram at Monique_Tracy. But you'll see Atieno. That is the one. Facebook, yes, Monique Tracy as well. I'm all over the place. And you can find me at many book launches that Mvua Press will be doing. Yeah, those are the many places you can find me. But I'm an introvert when I'm not at work. I love my space.
What should he say to capture your attention?
What should he say? I don't listen to words. I listen to actions. So show me the actions.
All right, Mr. Gentleman, come with somersaults. So there is a segment in this show, which is always how we wrap it, where you get to recommend a book to my next guest.
Okay.
But both of us don't know who that is going to be. So there is my previous guest who recommended a book to my next guest, who now happens to be you.
Wow.
And the book that was recommended by Chief, who is the marketing guy at Noria Books, Bennett, he was my previous guest. He recommended Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Ego is the enemy.
Ego is the Enemy. Published in 2016. It's about the treacherous nature of ego. And it says the most common enemy lies within.
Absolutely.
It's the ego.
I agree. I'd love to read the book.
Your quick take on ego. What's your perspective on ego?
It's got a big ego. Well, everyone has an ego, yeah. And there have been egos when they're competing egos, say like in a place of work. Hapo unapata sijui mtu damu ya mtu isikizani na mwingine. So I understand the intricacies of having a big ego, and also hapo kuna ndio inaitwa inferiority complex na superiority complex. Some have a savior complex, some have the subject or victim complex. So it's a big topic. Kila mtu tunajua kuna ego, na sometimes we can react to please that ego, or to not to feed it. And I think nikiendelea sana hapo nitaingiza religion, because religion tells us not to focus so much on that. But sometimes it's important to feed your ego, but also know how to tame it. It's like taming a horse. Yeah. You can let it run wild, but sometimes also have the brakes for it.
I'm happy to ask you this because you're a Luo woman.
Yes.
Luo women have been said to have ego.
Oh, everyone has egos. Now it depends on the level.
Yes.
They have a big ego, but I also, my sister once told me, sometimes know when to make room for others. I try, but honestly, imagine, by the way, I don't understand. I will not be in your face about it. I think I just love being in my space, but sometimes I feel that people, or some who have interacted with, might feel intimidated with that, because honestly, you can't shame the shameless. I wouldn't care what you have to say about me, and I think that is the thing that I love the most about me and the growth that I've experienced. And that's why the divorce from that mentality, is from the church mentality, is very important, because then I can embrace who I am entirely. Like, yeah, I can take up a space when I enter. I can take up space when I enter a room, but sometimes I also understand to calm down. So that is where my horse has brakes. So yeah, Luo women have big egos. That's why walisema tumeachiwa to the Luo men to deal with us.
All right, but now this now sets you up to recommend a book to my next guest.
Ooh.
Which book would you and why?
From my shelf.
I wouldn't limit it to your shelf, but if it comes from a shelf, well and good.
Now, you know me, I'll just say, okay. Well, listeners wake on kila mahali from all over the world. Gosh, there's so many books. There's so many books to recommend, Mike. Now what are you doing to me? So you tell me like 5 books I can. There are very many must reads here, but for the sake of women, I'll recommend After 4:30. This book I will not stop recommending. It's timeless. What happens after 4:30? Maybe people expect that because it's a mirror. There's a way people interpret this, but this book, it's small, but it's very necessary. In fact, the author was very generous. Akaongeza hapo a bonus novel, but read After 4:30, guys. Read After 4:30. It will help you understand the intricacies of a woman living in. But then this was a book that was written just after independence. So you can imagine, we are moving from colonialism, and now women are stepping into this new world where it's a man's world already. Number one, we've established. Now women are thinking, how can we take up space? So this book is very timely. It will let you now understand the world of Nairobi, understand the world of sinners, understand the world of the Confessions of Nairobi Women. This book is like a hallmark. And I call this man a genius because he is 51 years. Some people say artists are not in their time, but it's actually us who have to catch up. The artist is in their time. So it's us who have not caught up yet. So 51 years later, and the 1974 woman would wonder what a modern woman in 2025 is talking about. Like, girl, I've seen that, done that, been there before. What are you talking about? So After 4:30 is the creme de la creme for me.
All right. That is where the curtain comes to a close on today's show. Atieno, Ochieng, Tracy, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was a long podcast. I'm always on the other side.
Yes.
But thank you for having me. It's
Thank
been
you.
wonderful.
I'm grateful for giving me an opportunity to journalisticize the journalist.
Oh, you have. You have. And I've given some very questionable remarks. But we will not censor ourselves.
We'll not censor ourselves.
Yes.
That's why we're here at What's on Your Shelf. And thank you also who's journeyed with us to the very end. Thank you so much. What are your thoughts on this conversation today? What is it that Atieno has said that you agree with or disagree with?
Yeah.
Feel free to share that with us on the comment section. We'll be very happy to respond. And shall there be question for her? I want to promise you that it will get to her. But thank you so much for being a continuous supporter of this podcast. Our community continues to grow. And as we began the show, we are taking on that project to ensure that Kakelo Secondary School in Kasipul, Kabondo has a state-of-art library facility that can allow those kids that are in that school. And actually what I learned is that whole community, it might end up being the only library for a few other schools around that area. So let's take out that responsibility. Let's do what we can. And for What's on Your Shelf, we are grateful that you've journeyed with us to the very end. Thanks to you. Thanks to our partners on this podcast, the Nuria Bookstore, who've journeyed with us. And where I actually met Tracy during a book reading. And we look forward to even more insightful conversations like this. The Kenya National Library Service, who have an amazing facility. There are three, two in Nairobi, one in Nakuru, and very many other satellite facilities that they help, they manage. But check out knls.ac.ke to see the wide range of services that are offered with the Kenya National Library Service. It is not just the physical building that has books. They have a wide range of things that I am sure that you will enjoy. To me and the team behind What's on Your Shelf, we are grateful and thank you so much. And until the next one, have a good one.